3 years ago, I made a radio documentary that featured 5 extraordinary Egyptian women.
The hardest thing that we felt that nobody outside is knowing what's happening.
It's difficult for a woman because women have a lot of work inside and outside their homes.
God has been generous to me as a woman. I know my rights and I am demanding them.
With this police state, they can target you.
God created the woman this way. If he wanted to create her in another way, he was to create it.
Now I'm back to hear their stories and find out how their struggles helped shape a revolution where women were standing with men to overthrow a dictator. It's Friday after prayers, weeks on from Mubarak's departure, and still the marches and the protests continue at Tahrir Square. People exercising their newly gained rights in a joyful grassroots celebration of freedom and democracy. Dusk falls on Cairo, Africa's most populous city. Some 20 million people live here, nearly 1/4 of the country's population. It was here in downtown Cairo that the revolution took shape and gathered momentum. Mubarak and his ruling party were first stunned and then routed at a speed that no one anticipated. And women were there to make it happen. But as the new Egypt unfolds, will their struggle for rights be forgotten? I'm on my way to meet Dalia Ziada, a 29-year-old blogger. The last time I was here, she was full of energy and outrage and raising hell on the internet.
Hey, Dalia! How are you? Nice to see you again. Yeah. And you.
Back then, she had a tiny, cramped office in a suburb of Cairo. Now she's moving into a bigger office in a building close to Tahrir Square. Then she seemed naive. Now she's a hardened veteran of the struggle for rights.
No democracy without women's rights happening first. And people in the street and protesters and other Egyptians must understand this. If we didn't involve women in political life, no democracy shall happen.
Like many young Egyptians, Dalia was pulled out of the virtual world of cyber activism into the real world of Tahrir Square. On the 25th of January, she joined a protest against police brutality, and it was then it hit her. This was no ordinary protest. This was the beginning of the revolution.
Tahrir Square, so many memories, so many emotions come when you just mention the name, actually. It's amazing, this moment when you just get over your fear, get over your concern, you're ready to die for your country. It's a great moment. But at that day, I found just next to me a woman who's older in age, who is dressing in a way that tells you she's coming from a poor family and not educated. And when I asked her why you came here, she said, because I believe that we should have a change happen in our country one day. At that moment, I realized that it's not going to be just a protest, but it's going to turn into something really big.
The scale was unprecedented. After 30 years of the Mubarak regime, hundreds of thousands said no more. The revolution's sudden victory meant that families who had experienced at first hand the brutality of a police state were now reunited. I'm in Nasser City, which is a middle-class suburb of Cairo. I'm here to meet Zahraa Khirat El Shater. Now, Zahra is the daughter of the leading Muslim brother, Khirat El Shater. But back in 2008, Khirat and Zahra's husband were arrested, and she campaigned tirelessly against the Mubarak regime for their release. Well, that regime is gone, and just a few days ago, Zahra's father and her husband were released from jail. And I want to talk to her now about how she's feeling about this unfolding revolution and the role the Muslim Brothers may play in it. So let's go find out.
Yes.
Zahra is a school administrator. While we waited for her 3 children to come home from classes, my producer Daniel played her some of the radio program from 3 years ago. That seems like another world.
When I heard this, I remember that a lot of things changed, yes. During the period they weren't arrested, we were also afraid. This all affected them negatively. Yes.
While we're talking, Zahra's younger daughter comes in, quickly followed by her sister and brother. Education under Mubarak was closely monitored. Criticism of the state wasn't tolerated in the classroom.
Many topics I wasn't allowed to mention. You didn't have the freedom to give some topics to the children about freedom, about the government, about democracy. You didn't have the freedom because if you said this, they may close your school. The education is one of the most important. I think the values of the people are damaged by the means of the bad education, the bad media, the environment. All the environment was a negative environment for them. So I think now we have to rebuild their mentalities, their values, their way of thinking, to be good people in this society, to do good things.
Zahra's father, Khirat, is just out of jail. He's widely seen as the most powerful man in the Muslim Brotherhood, an Islamist organization long outlawed under Mubarak. Zahra had never stopped fighting for his release, but she found every door closed. It was the revolution that finally freed Khirat. And it is the revolution that's now prompting the Muslim Brothers to reinvent themselves, to assure the West they're not a threat. And one of the changes they're making is to encourage women into politics.
Before you come, I was debating with my sister. I was trying to tell her, why not try? Do this. I was encouraging her. I would like to, and I would be so happy to see this happening.
Women have been running for office for more than 50 years. But a year ago, there were just 8 female MPs in the Mubarak parliament. The government used women's rights to reach out to the West and even had a National Council for Women, which was not without its successes. However, as it was run by the president's wife and was based in the ruling party's headquarters, it too was swept aside by the revolution. As hard as it is for women in Cairo, step outside into rural Egypt and the battle becomes even tougher. I'm going to meet Aisha. She's a farmer and a factory worker. And the last time I saw her, she had organized women to strike for equal pay with men. And I want to find out what the revolution means to her and how it's changed her life. I've traveled 100 miles to Aisha's village, Abu Yahya. You can see communities like this all along the Nile. The delta is the breadbasket of the country and one of the most fertile regions on the continent. And yet, under Mubarak, rural Egypt sank deeper into poverty. As we walk through her fields, Aisha tells me how good it is to know the Mubarak family is finally gone.
حسيت أنا كان نفسي إن أنا أشارك. كان نفسي أبقى موجودة في الميدان بس مش كل اللي في.
Well, I really felt I wanted to be there. It's not people who participated in the protest and revolution are not only those who were in Tahrir. People were all over the country protesting. It's everybody. It was an Egyptian revolution.